Welcome friends to another r/maliciouscompliance video. If you want to get a giant thumbs up from me, make sure you hit the like and subscribe buttons down below. And our first story of the day is by Kath Joy. Manager forces me to get a doctor's note despite it being illegal to do so. Doctor writes him the most passive-aggressive note, signing me off for 2 weeks instead of 2 days to teach him a lesson. When I was in my early 20s, I worked at a supermarket. I should note that I was a pretty reliable employee. I was never late. In fact, I often got in early and I rarely called in sick. At the time this happened, I had not called in sick for 9 months, and even then, the manager had sent me home. I'd been up all night, swinging between burning hot and freezing cold, so I was obviously feverish, and I'd been throwing up at both ends, shall we say. At one point at about 2 a.m., I was on the toilet with my head in the sink, utterly miserable. I must have passed out because the next thing I knew, I was lifting my head off the sink and it was 7 a.m. I was due to start work at 12 that day, but that obviously wasn't going to happen. So I called up my manager. Let's call the manager Steve. Steve was known for being a real jerk. He never believed anyone who called in sick except his best buds, usually other managers, never lowly staff, but often called in sick himself. A lot of the time we knew it was because he was hungover and not actually sick. The conversation went as follows. I said, "Hey Steve, sorry I can't come in, I'm sick." Steve says, "With what?" I say, "I don't know, I think it might be the flu. I've been up all night being sick and I have a fever." He says, "Don't be stupid. If you had the flu, you'd be completely knocked out. I need you in. Come in or you're fired." I say, "I can't. I just told you I can't stop vomiting. I passed out." Steve, growling angrily, says, "Either come in or bring a doctor's note or you're fired." In the UK, you're legally allowed to self-certify for 5 days. This means you can tell your employer you're sick and you do not need a doctor's note. If you're sick for more than 5 days, you then need a note. It's also illegal to demand a doctor's note during the self-certify period. I knew this, but I was terrified. This was during the recession. I couldn't afford to lose my job. So I got myself dressed, almost passed out trying to do so, then trudged to the doctor some 25 minutes to walk away. I ended up sitting in the doctor's office for a little over an hour, which for walk-in was pretty good. I get in to see the doctor and she's furious at me for coming in. You're not supposed to come to the doctor's when you have a cold or flu, and of course, I knew I should be able to self-certify. She told me as much, saying I shouldn't be here and should have stayed at home. I then explained what had happened with Steve and how he had threatened to fire me over this and I couldn't afford to lose my job. I was struggling as it was. My doctor turned her anger towards my manager. She asked if I got sick pay from the company, and I said yes. "He wants a sick note, does he?" the doctor says. "Okay, I'll give him a sick note." Now, my manager just wanted a note confirming I was sick, but instead, my doctor wrote something along the lines of this. "OP has come to the surgery because manager name has insisted she come in spite of the fact that this is illegal and all employees are allowed to self-certify. Due to being forced to make this unnecessary and highly dangerous trip when the patient is ill, has a fever of 39 degrees Celsius, and almost passed out in the waiting room, I am signing OP off for 2 full weeks to recover." Had OP been allowed to self-certify, as is the law, they might have only needed a few days, but due to straining themselves, they now require 2 full weeks. They are not permitted to be to work until date 2 weeks from now. The doctor said she would have signed me off longer, but this was the longest she could do without requiring further evidence. So basically, instead of just being off for a few days, I was now signed off for a full 2 weeks and I'd be paid for it. I went to my place of work, at which point one of the duty managers saw me and asked what the heck I was doing here, go home. I was obviously very unwell. I explained what happened. They agreed to help me downstairs to Steve's office and went with me inside. I handed Steve the note. He looked worried and tried to say, "I wasn't being serious about firing you." "Well, gee, when you angrily growled it down the phone, it sure sounded like it." The duty manager then declared that they were going to drive me home. It was clear Steve wanted to argue but had the sense to know he shouldn't. The duty manager drove me home, made sure I was okay, then went back to work where they informed our union rep of what had happened. Steve had a disciplinary hearing where he was given a severe reprimand and a warning. Steve tried to argue he never said I'd be fired and I was lying and just decided to go to the doctors. But the duty manager said they heard him admit to it when he said to me that he really didn't mean it. I felt better after a few days and enjoyed my 2 weeks off, fully paid, and enjoyed the nice weather we had. Meanwhile, Steve was forced to work overtime because we were short-staffed. So thanks to the doctor, instead of being off for a few days, I ended up getting a nice 2-week paid vacation, and Steve was given a final warning, all because he insisted I get a doctor's note. From what I read further on in the comments, this was a food handling job too. Imagine a manager being so stubborn about someone being sick that they demanded somebody to come in and handle food while they were sick and throwing up and the other end all night long. Do you agree that for this offense, Steve only getting reprimanded and a warning is kind of like a little slap on the wrist? I think he should have been fired. What about you guys? Do you agree that he should have been fired? Let me know what you think in the comments down below. Our next story is by Baked Wizard, unknowingly asking a manager to speak to a manager. I got to witness this glorious moment a few years ago. For context, at the store I worked, the only difference between a manager's uniform and a regular employee was a small little embroidered image on the shirt. And if you didn't work there, you probably wouldn't be able to tell. We had a specific type of clientele, old rich white men, who generally assumed anyone who appeared under the age of 30 to be a lowly employee. Let's call my manager T. A very friendly guy, late 20s, longer shaggy hair and a bit of stubble. Not someone you would assume to be a manager if you subscribe to certain stigmas. So T and I are doing some work in a department he manages, of which the employee had left to go to the bathroom or something, so the customer in question asked if T and I could assist him. There was an item in the display case he was interested in purchasing, and we spent a solid 10 minutes helping him find and figure out a specific accessory for this item. The display model was also the last of these items left. At this store, if you bought the display model for an item, we would generally give you a 10% "it's out of the box and has been handled" discount, with a few exceptions, one of which I will let T explain. Customer says, "Alright, would I be able to get a display discount?" T says, "Actually, this item is a part of a huge clearance sale we're doing, and the sale price is below cost." He had checked on our system, so corporate has instructed us not to give any further discounts on these items. Customer says, "But it's all scratched up and has fingerprints on it." It looked perfectly fine. T says, "I'm sorry, but I can't do it. It's still a really good deal though. In fact, if you don't buy it, I'm going to buy it after my shift, and I won't even get an employee discount on it." The customer says, "Well, that's not how you do business." T says, "Again, I'm sorry, but it's how we do business here." They say, "So you're not going to give me a discount?" T says, "No sir, I'm sorry, I can't." "Then how about you bring me someone who could, like a manager?" At this point, I had to turn away as I was standing right next to the customer and couldn't hold back the grin on my face. I watched out of the corner of my eye as he gave an awkward, stifled chuckle with a poop-eating grin that matched mine. He said, "Well, actually, that'd be me." And the jovial tone he said it in was just the cherry on top. And as I said earlier, we're not permitted to lower these prices any further. The customer was silent, and T could tell he was fuming, so he waved over the employee who was returning from the bathroom to finish up helping the customer, so he and I could get back to our task. But made sure to loudly tell the employee, "Just call me over if you need anything." The funny thing, the customer ended up buying a different item that cost more to prove a point, I guess. I saw T shortly before he left for the day near the cash registers, buying the item the customer refused to buy, ultimately staying true to his word. I'm just glad the item survived the day so that T could go ahead and buy it. I think it's great that T was excited about the item, was able to just basically laugh about this customer, and then actually secure it at the end of the day. Our next story is by Ice Rose 39. I participate too much? Okay. I was new to a company, but had done the job for years at other companies. The new company required that I go through the new employee training. I understood, every company has their differences, and it would mean just sitting on easy and boring Zoom trainings for 2 weeks from home. I figured I could manage it. Knowing I had a lot of experience but was surrounded by first-timers, I didn't want to show off or be a know-it-all, but I still participated week 1. When asked, I gave opinions, answered questions, asked questions. I felt I found a decent balance of not taking over conversations but still being present. Well, end of week 1, my supervisor checks in with me. In our convo, they recognized that this is all old news for me. They recommended that I just hang back and let everyone else enjoy training and participate less. Cue malicious compliance? I took this to mean that I should stop talking. Remember, I felt pretty appropriate or balanced week 1. I held back a lot. So not only did I stop talking, but I turned my Zoom camera off and now spent the training time doing things around the house, watching TV, etc. I would listen in at the beginning and end of every training just to make sure I knew what happened, but otherwise I checked out. I'd catch other moments here and there and hear a lot of empty silences and even some really problematic answers being shared. I can't say I was important or needed, but I think having someone experienced pop in twice a day to fill in a silence or share a real experience could have been nice. So the end of the week comes along and we take a quiz of sorts. Doesn't affect our job, but we get real-time feedback on our answers. I ace the quiz. After we take each part of the quiz, we discuss it as a group. The group struggled, and I was so tempted to just answer a question once to move things along, but I held back as requested. The more incorrect the answers were, the more we had to discuss. So if I had just said, I got B for number 2 because XYZ, they'd say, great explanation, let's move on to number 3. Instead, we spent 5 to 10 minutes per question, taking up 2+ hours in total, to review a quiz that gave us the answers as we went. I could tell the supervisors didn't expect it to take this long, but I didn't even attempt to assist. I just sat there with my perfect score, letting everyone else learn. In an odd way, I think it's actually a great thing that OP held back and didn't involve themselves. The bottom line, the training's there to train people, and all these people with incorrect answers or don't know how the processes work or are fumbling things, they're all there to catch those exact things and help train against those inadequacies. So if anything, if OP was involving themselves in answering questions and moving things along, a lot of people would probably be getting dragged along while doing terribly. The bottom line, they know they won't have a problem with you, so the focus is just let the people who do have problems kind of work through those problems. And our final story of the day is by Vanangia. Sure, I can use my cell phone. Some years ago, back when Skype was the most advanced meeting tool around, I was the most junior person on a team of 5 working on a large international project. Though I was there to help with the technical aspects of the job, a number of administrative tasks also ended up in my lap, things like scheduling and connecting meetings and so on. Despite there being an administrative assistant on the team, that's because the admin assistant was downright unhelpful and the team lead was frustrated with her and taking it out on the rest of the team. For example, I'd been with the team for almost 4 months and they still hadn't sorted out a desk or cube for me. I was literally doing my work with a work laptop, sitting in a coffee shop and using my cell phone. One day, the senior technical officer announced he'd have to go to a tiny Pacific island state, Samoa I think, for a week-long trip to sort out a mess on an older project he'd been involved with that had gone sideways, and leaves for a 48-hour flight time to Samoa on a Saturday. On Monday, the team lead sends everyone on the team an email saying we'll do a weekly check-in call instead of a meeting on Wednesday afternoon, and asks me to set up the call and connect everyone. I reply almost immediately asking if I can borrow someone's desk for the duration of the call, because otherwise it would cost me $6.50 a minute for me to call Samoa from my cell phone versus using a desk phone at work, which all costs are automatically paid for. He replies copying the admin assistant, telling me to talk to her. Over the next couple of days, I ask the admin assistant, for a desk or a cube for an hour on Wednesday? No. Can she connect the call instead? No. How about me coming over, connecting the call on her phone, and then leaving? No. Does she have any suggestions? No. It's Wednesday morning and I don't have a solution. So I call the team lead and he thinks I've been insufficiently creative and just snarkily replies, just use your phone. I remind him it'll be hugely expensive, but he's pissed with the admin assistant and with me by extension and just says, we'll sort it out later. Okay then, so I make the call from my phone connecting all 5 of us. It's supposed to be a 30-minute call. It ends up being over 70 minutes. And then the senior technical officer in Samoa says, by the way, I think I'm going to have to stay another week. There's a contract dispute as well as a technical issue with the project. The team lead says, no problem, we'll do the same call again next week, same time, same way. I start right after that call with trying to find a way to call from a desk phone. No joy. I again plead with the team lead to just let me use someone's office for an hour for the call. No joy. So off we go to another 50-minute call on Wednesday. The cell phone bill closed on Tuesday of the second week, and I get it on Thursday. So on Friday, I submit an expense request for the $470-ish in charges, plus 10% taxes and fees. My team's lead manager immediately rejects it and sends a message to my team lead asking what the freak happened here. The team lead tries to throw me under the bus. I reply with a chain of emails and make it abundantly clear that this is a reimbursable cost and they have to pay. The manager is pissed, but begrudgingly agrees, telling me it's a one-time thing. Well, actually, we had a second call yesterday, and that's on next month's bill. That'll be around $400. Had they let me use a desk phone for 2 hours, the cost would have been about $20, and it would have been picked up by the company's central telephone budget instead of having to be paid out of the team's budget. I quit the team about 3 weeks later when the admin assistant started trying to assign me work. I don't know what's going on here, but it seems like some kind of relationship or nepotism or something. I don't understand how an administrative assistant can have a job for so long, make so many mess-ups, don't do their job, and still just keep on floating along just fine. Something's definitely fishy here. But despite that fishiness, that's all the time we have for today. So of all these stories I've read today, which is your favorite and why? Let me know in the comments down below. And if you haven't yet, if you could like and subscribe, that would mean a lot to me. Whatever you do, whether it's liking, subscribing, turning notifications on, all of it helps grow this channel and I appreciate the heck out of it. So until next time, I'll see you all tomorrow with some more stories.